Carlson. He's the Joseph L. Vaughn Professor of Humanities and Chair at the Engineering and Society Department at the University of Virginia. And he's going to enlighten us on immersion learning and on entrepreneurship. So help me welcome Bernie. Bernie.
Thank you. So I appreciate that introduction, and thank you so much for joining me this morning. This is my third visit, as I said a few moments ago during Dr. Strom's talk, to the kingdom, and I get so much out of this. I learn and I'm energized because here you really are thinking about how entrepreneurship can change the world. And much like I was saying, Thomas Jefferson believed that he was going to change the world. He was going to, create a whole new society around his university. You're trying to do the same thing. And I'm especially glad that we're talking today about entrepreneurial mindsets, because this is at the heart of what I have spent a lot of time doing in my work as a historian, as an educator in an engineering school, is helping people to develop a different way of viewing the world. That's what we mean by a mindset. And in particular, an entrepreneurial mindset has several features. I think one, first and foremost, it's helping people have a bias for action. That is to say that we're not just going to experience the world in some sort of passive sense, but we're actually going to be involved in changing the world, in improving it, in bringing technology to bear to certain things that we hold dear, that we regard as values. But another part of the mindset, which is what I really want to talk about with you today, is it's not just a bias for action. Oh yes, let's do things, but how are you actually going to do things? How do you pursue a project? How do you pursue a venture step by step so that you actually have results, you have an action that changes the world? So I'm so glad that we're talking about mindset today, but I want you to be thinking about that. That's the bigger thing, what I mean by mindset. It's a bias for action, but it's also knowing how to do something about that. So I'm going to, there it is. Oh, thank you. Okay. I knew that if it wasn't blinking red that I was doing something wrong. I mean, I had the bias for action, but not necessarily the ability to do anything about it now. Okay. So I want to do this within the context of my university and focus in particular on the engineering school. So just very briefly, the University of Virginia is a state university, so it's similar to Purdue University that Dr. Peckney is going to talk about this afternoon. The difference is we're not a land-grant college. We're just the state university. We view ourselves as the flagship university for the Commonwealth of Virginia, and as you can see, some statistics about the size of the university are up there. School of Engineering and Applied Science, which I call home, is about 10% of the university. It's about 2,700 undergraduates. It's about 600 graduate students. We have 147 faculty. I run one of the 9 departments in the engineering school, Engineering and Society. One of the most interesting things, we're going through our own phase of transformation in focusing less on the departments and on developing research clusters, and indeed we're actually just announced in the last month or so that we're going to have a research cluster in the area of cyber physical systems, the Internet of Things, and we're conducting 8 searches for 8 professors in that particular area. My dean wanted to make sure I said that to you. So, I wanted to also just emphasize that we are part of. Someday I will learn what I'm doing here. Yes, thank you. Maybe I should just go with the backwards. Right. Take me back. Yeah. Mouse here. I don't know. I'm messing with the mouse. Cool. Okay. No, you're going the wrong way. I'm showing them everything. You're giving away all of my secrets. Yeah. So So now you've seen everything, so any questions? Okay. Yeah, that's why, you see how I'm getting into trouble. Okay.
So probably just stick to the old technology, so use the mouse, I'm sorry.
Right.
We'll figure out something.
Okay, so you just clicked left. Okay. Okay. So what I'm simply showing you this is just to say that the UVA's entrepreneurial ecosystem is actually fairly complex. Each of the schools that you can see over on the left-hand side, the third one over from the left is the School of Engineering. We have our own technology program, but the two business schools have a program. The public policy school has a program. There is a great deal of activity in and around the University of Virginia. And as I said while I was talking during Dr. Strom's talk, we see ourselves as all pulling together in a series of activities at the University of Virginia, and indeed emphasizing this new entrepreneurship minor. And if you have questions about that, I'm happy to take them at the end. But what I want to talk about today is what we do specifically in technology entrepreneurship and how within that we develop a particular sort of mindset. And so the courses that are, that constitute our program are an Intro to Technology Entrepreneurship course, which introduces the entrepreneurial mindset. I've been teaching that for a number of years. But we also offer a range of electives on different topics that we feel that students that are interested in innovation, interested in launching technology-based ventures need to know about. So we have intellectual property, we have operations, we have finance, we have an interesting course on government relations taught by a former head of the Department of Commerce and Innovation for the state of Virginia. So we do a whole number of things. These courses are taken, just so as I talk more about the specifics of one course, they're taken by a variety, they're taken by both undergraduate engineering students, but students also from other parts of the university. So to think about immersion learning in entrepreneurship, I want to start with a metaphor that I find helpful, which is how are swimming and entrepreneurship alike? Okay, so as we often said when I was growing up, that you can read a book about swimming and you can look at all the pictures, and the book can be very nice, but you don't know anything about swimming until you actually go to the pool or go to the ocean and you jump in and you start paddling around. So I want you to consider for a moment that entrepreneurship is a lot like swimming in the following sense. You can read all sorts of textbooks, you can learn all sorts of entrepreneurial theories, but you really don't know anything about entrepreneurship until you actually try your hand at it, that you actually try to build a venture. So immersion learning, it refers to a set of teaching practices which emphasize that students learn best when they're placed in very special situations. Situations that approximate the real world, situations that allow students to practice what they've learned in the classroom or from reading a textbook. In other words, it's like the swimming thing. You've found out about it, you've got some information, but then you actually go and jump in the pool and try practicing it. And probably most importantly, from what I've read in the literature about immersion learning, is what makes it powerful for students is they have to make decisions, they have to make choices, and they have to kind of see what the consequences of those choices are. So why is immersion learning important for entrepreneurs? Well, I'm a historian, and one of the things I'll tell you about from looking at a variety of cases across history, particularly American history, which I know about, is that entrepreneurs generally fail several times before they succeed. R.H. Macy, founder of a famous department store, actually had 5 different kinds of stores, 5 different retail businesses before he got the formula right for what became the modern department store. Henry Ford goes through 3 different automobile companies before he actually gets the arrangement of the finance, the marketing, and the manufacturing right that allows him to develop the Model T. So history raises in my mind that if you're developing entrepreneurial mindsets, you're thinking about creating the next generation of highly talented people, that we need to give our students a chance to have several ventures before they exit the university, before they go out in the real world. And that one of the roles that courses should play is to provide them with several opportunities to do just that. Now, immersion learning, to be clear, can take lots of forms. You can teach by using business school cases, which students read, and as they get into reading the case and they get the details, they are forced to come to a point by the end of the case where they have to make a decision, and then they discuss and defend the decision when they go to the class discussions. You can have field experiences where students interact with real customers, and one of the best examples of this is the toy project at Villanova University, where engineering students go out into the local elementary schools, they interview young children, and they find out what kind of toys they want. And then they go back and then they prototype those toys, take the prototypes back to the field, allow the children to play with them, and so they learn about customer discovery by this very, very direct interaction with the children. There are online simulations where people use Second Life or other digital worlds to develop entrepreneurs. There are schools such as NC State, which has a very vigorous program for entrepreneurship in its engineering program, where the students basically go through a series of courses over several semesters where they participate in a virtual startup. And of course, there are also internships where students actually are fully immersed in the entrepreneurship experience because they go out and they spend time in a company. All immersion experiences like this emphasize teamwork, and they emphasize that hands-on learning is very important, that it's important to be doing. Now, our approach at UVA is in those entrepreneurship courses that we do for technology, almost all have some sort of project. So that within the course of one semester, we ask students to spend about 8 to 10 weeks working on a project. In other words, there'll be some introductory activities, some introductory readings and work that we do in the beginning of the semester, kind of frame what the task is or what the opportunity is, and then we immerse students in those activities. And I think there are really two goals that my colleagues and I have when we take this approach. One is we want the students to experience all the steps in the entrepreneurial process, from ideation all the way to beginning to think about what happens when that idea becomes a product and it's going to be in the marketplace. And we want them, as I've said a moment ago, to have several opportunities, course by course, to try their hand at building a venture, and to do so with different products, with different teammates. Kind of conceptually underlying what we're doing in this approach is two kind of pedagogical theories. One is entrepreneurship as effectuation, which comes from my colleague at the University of Virginia up at the Darden School, Sarah Saravathi. And Saravathi emphasizes in her effectuation theory that you work not from so much the opportunity that's out there as much as the resources you have from within. Who are you? What do you know? What are you passionate about? What are you good at? And can you formulate an opportunity on the basis of that self-knowledge to go out and affect change in the world? So it's a very, very different sort of notion of entrepreneurship, but a very powerful one that resonates often with students and with different populations. And for that reason, Professor Saravathi is in high demand all over the world. And I know she regretted that she wasn't going to be able to join us here to present in this forum. The other big idea comes from my work in teaching engineers, which is we really, in the world of engineering at least, we only know things when we're able to represent them. To write or to draw a picture or to create a simulation or to indeed write an equation is to know something about the world. And through a series of activities, when I teach entrepreneurship, I use things such as rocket pitches or having the students write a patent application, not just to communicate the ideas to other audiences, but to use those writing exercises, those exercises of trying to capture the idea and represent it in words or pictures as a way of sifting through the alternatives and making decisions about that, and indeed also in building teams. Now, it's very easy for undergraduates in particular have no exposure to business, no exposure to entrepreneurship, to flounder. And so it's important that if you're really going to develop an entrepreneurial mindset, that you think about a set of activities, a set of assignments that build one on top of the other so that the students gain in expertise and also in confidence. And so in at least the Intro to Technology Entrepreneurship course, I use a series of activities that I'm going to talk a little bit about each here for a moment, but they basically stack on the one after the other. So the students have an idea notebook, then they do an individual rocket pitch, then they create an individual coat of arms, which allows the students to figure out how they want to form teams. And I don't make the teams, I allow the students to organize themselves into teams. And then as teams, they produce a patent application. They use the business model canvas that comes from Steve Blank, and then I have them do a team or a business plan poster. Now, all of these assignments, a critical piece is, as I say, is the students go from soup to nuts, from beginning to end, in the entrepreneurial process over a period of 8 to 10 weeks, and they learn to use these different assignments to sift out ideas, to figure out what they really want to do and what is the critical combination of technology with the market opportunity. It's the middle one is the laser, right? The top one is the laser. Okay, thank you. So they start over here with lots and lots of ideas that they put in their notebook, and the first kind of filter that they use to sift through those ideas is the rocket pitch. In other words, they might, by the time they do the rocket pitch in my class, they may have made upwards of 50 ideas into their notebook, and so they need to sift through those, pick one to pitch. Okay, all of the students listen to the rocket pitch. A second filter is when they form a team, the team decides on which of several ideas or one idea the team wants to run with. Okay, in the middle, they work on a patent application which further refines the idea. They work on a business model canvas where they look at the value proposition, and then ultimately, when they come up with the business plan, they really have chosen a single idea, and they're beginning to make a very specific case for that. Okay, so let me say a few things, because there's some interesting features about each of those exercises I have the student do. So the idea notebook is an idea that Thomas Edison said, Sonny, at one point in his career, he said, Sonny, we all steal. Some of us just steal better than others. Okay? So I am an unabashed adapter of other people's ideas, which I have weaved together here. So one is my friend Takeo Higuchi from Japan developed this whole idea marathon system. And in fact, part of it is he was an executive at Fuji Heavy Industries, and in a critical part in his career, he actually spent 10 years in Saudi Arabia. And I'm not sure what he was doing here, but he went and he spent time in a variety of cultures. And I think some of his thinking reflects those time in all of these different cultures. So he said, listen, you create a notebook, write down 1 or 2 ideas every day. Part of it is showing up and doing it every day. And you follow his sort of steps that he suggests here. And as a result, the students begin to see, and this is one of the reasons why I make every student keep an idea notebook, is that they're all capable of being creative. In other words, there's no one that's allowed in my class to sort of kind of look at their shoes and go, I can't invent anything. Because everybody can come up with interesting ideas. And they can write anything down that they want in their notebooks. Once they have, say, those, a number of ideas in their notebooks, they all make a 3-minute presentation, which is highly focused, and they only can use 3 PowerPoint slides. And it always has to conclude, and this is really hard for undergraduates. And again, part of the mindset is getting them into situations that are, in a classroom situation, are uncomfortable, but allow them to grow. And so every rocket pitch has to end with a call to action. What do you need next to move your project along? And they're not allowed to say, I need $1 million. Okay? Because A, that's not realistic, but B, it's making a very set of simplistic assumptions about what actually you need to do to develop the idea. While they're doing the rocket pitch, about the same time, I stole an idea from Professor Saravathi, which is I have them do this coat of arms exercise. And in the coat of arms exercise, they think about what are their personal strengths and attributes. And they try to express those by using symbols, by using a motto, by putting different things on the coat of arms. And so this is one of my students came up with that, that reflects their particular, what their particular strengths are. Now the students all listen to the rocket pitches, they look at all their coat of arms, and then I basically leave them in the room, and I say, no one gets out of here alive until you've actually made yourself into teams of 4 or 5. And what I found is this is an important kind of takeaway on this is they not only look at each other's coat of arms, but they actually look at the rocket pitch not for the idea, but for the quality of the individual. Do I want to work with that person? Do I like their sense of humor? Do I like their strengths? Do I like their abilities? And that they then form into a team that works on these other activities. I have the students do, following USPTO guidelines, an actual patent application, which has a complete technical description, the drawings, and the claims. Now, again, this is probably highly adapted to the engineering school environment, and that's fine. But what happens is, as they produce the patent application, they often realize, first by doing a patent search, that their idea already exists. And so they have to pivot. They also realize that as they work with each other, they have to make compromises. They have to make deals with each other as to whose particular insight gets worked into the patent. And so there's, again, a sifting of the ideas that occurs in the patent application. And I bring in outsiders who grill the students, which is another part of the process which they're never happy, but they have to go through this mock patent examination where someone sort of says, I'm not going to give you that claim. Or you haven't really actually explained that. And they don't like this. But again, it's part of the mindset is engaging, part of the developing the mindset is engaging them in activities that force them to learn how to take risks and how to learn from their mistakes. I also use the business model canvas, which is similar to the model frame that Dr. Bertram has introduced, and I know that they use at the EI. But one of the unusual things that I found is helpful with the students is again, back to effectuation. The students always have to be thinking about what are their strengths, what are their abilities. And the first time I have them fill out that business model canvas is I have them fill out all of the boxes on the single sheet around, again, what are their assets, what are their interests, where's a good starting point for customer discovery. As they work through the business model canvas and they do some research on cost, they do research on the price of competitive products, they think about the potentials of financing, I've actually kind of moved away from having them do a full-fledged business plan because they tend to do that in kind of they follow a template and they do it in kind of a slavish way and they don't necessarily, they begin to lose track of the forest because they get stuck in all of the trees, all of the details. And so I have them do a poster. I'm not entirely happy with this particular template for the poster, but more importantly, they display the poster in a public place, and they have to stand up and they have to talk about it, and they have to be able to defend their particular ideas around this. Again, good practice for getting ready for when they actually pitch to real-life investors. There are a number of variations across the different courses that my colleagues pursue. Just to point out, in the interest of keeping this moving in the interest of time, that one of them that's really interesting is the corporate entrepreneurship. In other words, the students actually in new product development at our university pick a company, research the company, and look at the company's portfolio of products and services and say, what would be an extension of a product line that would fit the company's strategy, the company's portfolio. Students, after they finish the course, they've had a project, they really like the project, they like their teammates, they often, continue to follow these things, and they take advantage of resources that we have at the university. So we have creativity spaces, we have funding, we have competitions. They can ultimately go to the incubator that my colleague Sean Carr and his team operate up at the Darden School. But the important thing is to have individuals who keep track of the students and encourage them to take advantage of those resources. So, final thoughts. What I've tried to argue here with you folks, or what I've suggested here is if you want to have effective immersion in entrepreneurship, I'd argue that you have to have some kind of structure in place so the students don't flounder, that you have a set of activities or assignments that guide their experience. It's not enough to say, you know, get creative, launch a venture. The process of teaching entrepreneurship, as I was listening to the previous other talks, is really striking the right balance between the wild imagination and the energy and the passion that often young people have, but also providing just enough framework so they actually can get something done. And immersion learning is where we're trying to do that. I think it's very important that students get a chance to practice at organizing a venture. And it has to be okay, and this is one of the things that you can do in a classroom, it has to be okay if everything doesn't turn out perfectly. Because my final thought is what's one of the roles of the university? It has to be a place where students get to practice and learn from their mistakes. And as Dr. Peckney pointed out, the original purpose of the University of Bologna is so scholars could withdraw from the world and argue about the nature of knowledge without having to worry about the political and social and cultural repercussions. And in some ways, in the university of the 21st century, if we're teaching entrepreneurs, is we have to create a space where it's all right to take chances around technology, take chances around economic activities. And so this leads to, you know, a final kind of motto that I've come away with in thinking about immersion learning and entrepreneurship is we often say in the sporting world, it's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. And for teaching entrepreneurship, as my last point there says, it's not whether students come up with a blockbuster idea or make $1 million of profit, but how they strive to master the entrepreneurial mindset. And so I hope these have been useful ideas. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Bernie. We do have a few minutes for a question or two. If anyone's... No questions?
No questions.
I do have a question if no one has.
Oh.
Okay, yes, go ahead. So, Victoria, if you were just to press the...
Yeah, push your button.
What is the iLab concept, and how much instrumentation is there or fabrication levels available to the students?
Okay, so the iLab is a typical incubator, and there most of the facilities are available for doing the business plan, for basically consulting with the accountants and the legal people that they need to incorporate. But we also have a series of facilities, which I'm proud of. I have a picture, where the students actually can do the prototyping and build the equipment. And that's actually more in the engineering school. The iLab, the incubator, is actually over in Darden at the business school. But we have a number of facilities that are listed here, like the 3D printing lab, where the students, much like you can go to a print shop and have copies of Xeroxes made, they can have an account at the 3D printing lab just like in an old Xerox shop, and they can actually order up their prototype. In other words, they can just send the files, come back tomorrow, and the prototype is actually made for them. And they really are very lucky to have that. Does that help?
Who pays for that?
Who pays for that?
Yes.
The students actually. Well, the university pays for the 3D lab and the facility, but the students actually pay for the cost of the materials that they use in the 3D lab.
Okay. Yes.
I'm Rashid Khan with your uncle.
Yes.
Very interesting presentation. A very quick question. I like the idea about this mock patent exam. As you know, patent nation is an extreme difficult process, not just for the purpose of whether it's novel or not, but non-obviousness.
Right.
And it can take often years of going back and forth. So it's a very complex and very sophisticated process. So I think it's good to have the students' exposure. But having said that, who are the people who are monitoring or mentoring that? Are they licensed patent examiners or patent agents, or you just basically designate somebody who has a lot of patenting experience?
So in the actual, this is a good question, and it emphasizes where I'd like to go with this. So the mentoring process is based on working from a very reliable text that basically is titled "Patent It Yourself in 24 Hours." And then I have a team of teaching associates that have taught this over and over and over again. But I always assure them that if you're actually going to take this preliminary patent application and you're going to pay the $250 and send it out, you do want to show it to a lawyer. An important feature about my university's practice for undergraduates and intellectual property is as long as they don't use any facilities of the university in material sense. In other words, they are not actually using a giant piece of equipment in one of the engineering labs. They own the intellectual property, so we don't get involved at the technology transfer office, though those folks have plenty of expertise that if the students get deeply involved, we do send them over there. But we're always careful because we want the students to actually own the IP. I know we got to keep going.
Good,
So
yes.
you want
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Bernie.
So I'm happy to take other questions at lunch.